Good morning. In the spirit of reconciliation with our Indigenous brothers and sisters, I would like to acknowledge that I'm speaking today from the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people in the National Capital Region who have been stewards of this land since time immemorial. I'm Fareed Khan, founder of Canadians United Against Hate and a human rights activist, and today I'm joined via video by Dr. Aliya Khan, co-chair of Doctors for Humanity, Rabbi David Mivasair of Independent Jewish Voices, from British Columbia, Senator Yuen Wu, and from the Legal Center for Palestine, lawyer Dania Kassim. We're all here to mark a day that should never have happened. Today, July 3rd, Israel crossed a very ugly threshold as the world watched. 1,000 days of genocide in Gaza. 1,000 days of mass murder, bombings, missile strikes. 1,000 days of Israeli soldiers shooting children and raping women. 1,000 days of deliberate starvation, forced displacement, and the systematic destruction of an entire people. 1,000 days in which Western nations, defenders of the so-called international rules-based order, have done nothing to stop genocide, and some of them have actually enabled it. Since October 2023, Gaza has been turned into one giant killing field. By conservative estimates, over 80,000 Palestinians have been killed. Over 1,000 days, entire family lines have been erased, and tens of thousands of people, mostly children, lie buried under the rubble of Gaza, under homes, schools, and hospitals. For thousands of days, Gaza's universities, archives, museums, library, mosques, and churches, their entire cultural infrastructure has been obliterated. During this time, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, B'Tselem, Physicians for Human Rights Israel, the International Federation of Human Rights, the International Association of Genocide Scholars, and the Yuen have all concluded that Israel is committing genocide. The evidence shows that Israel's crimes are undeniable. Yet Canada, the US, UK, Germany, and other allies refuse to call the crime by its name, genocide. Canada and other nations, and worse, Canada and other nations continue to arm Israel, with Canada using a legal loophole to continue weapons sales. These Western governments, through their actions and their refusals to act, have effectively endorsed Israel's genocidal project of wiping out all Palestinians in Gaza, making their leaders criminally complicit in genocide. This persistent refusal to intervene or even call the crime by its name reveals an alignment with Israel's genocidal ambitions. Canada's government, under both Justin Trudeau and Mark Carney, has also perfected the art of criminal hypocrisy. Canada claims to defend human rights and the rule-based international order, yet when genocide unfolded in Gaza, when people were slaughtered, it violated legal obligations under the UN Charter and the Genocide Convention. It has refused to take the minimum actions required of any state when another nation commits genocide. If Mark Carney were truly committed to the international order, as he spoke of in Davos, he would impose a full arms embargo on Israel, sanction all Israeli political and military leaders for genocide, suspend the Canada-Israel Free Trade Agreement, support South Africa's genocide case at the ICJ, as NATO allies Belgium, Iceland, the Netherlands, Turkey, and Spain have done. It would expel the Israeli ambassador and recall our ambassador from Israel, and launch genocide prosecutions under Canadian law for any Canadians who have traveled to Israel to join the Israeli military since 2023. These are the bare minimum acts of any nation or political leader claiming to have a moral compass in the face of genocide, something which Canada and its leaders seem to have thrown away. Contrast this with Canada's response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and it exposes a racist double standard. For Ukraine, Canada acted with speed and moral clarity, with sanctions, diplomatic isolation, a unanimous parliamentary declaration of genocide, and billions of dollars in aid given to Ukraine. For Palestinians, Canada offered symbolic gestures, empty rhetoric, and continued complicity. 1,000 days of genocide have shattered the illusion of Canada's and Western moral authority. The post-1945 human rights order, built on the ashes of the Holocaust and the promise of never again is effectively dead. It's clear that Canada's and Western humanity is conditional, racialized, and only there when it's politically convenient. As we mark 1,000 days of genocide, sorry, I don't know where that's coming from. As we mark 1,000 days of genocide in Gaza, we must speak the truth plainly. Israel has committed the crime of crimes, and Canada and its allies know it and have been accessories to those crimes. 1,000 days of genocide demands decisive action, and we must demand that the Mark Carney government find its morality and listen to the voices of millions of Canadians who've marched in the streets, who have chosen basic humanity, human rights, and justice for Palestinians over complicity in genocide, and that Canada live up to its legal obligations under international law. Thank you, and now I'll pass the microphone over to Dr. Aliya Khan.
Thank you so much. My name is Dr. Aliya Khan. I'm co-chair of Doctors for Humanity. The United Nations' most recent report has concluded that Israel is committing genocide of Palestinian children in Gaza. It documents systematic torture, starvation, forced displacement, and mass killings. And Canadian physicians are outraged. Doctors for Humanity represents more than 3,000 Canadian physicians and is calling for immediate action. At least 71,800 Palestinians have been killed, including 21,289 Palestinian children killed as a direct result of Israeli military action. And these figures are a gross underestimate, as they do not include the many victims who are buried under the rubble, and more than 171,000 injured Palestinians, including 44,500 injured children. Canada is a signatory to the Genocide Convention and has both a legal and moral obligation to act to prevent genocide and save lives. We have seen the deliberate targeting of children, shooting children by Israeli forces at close range in the head, the chest, and the genitals. We have seen sniper fire, drone attacks, and the use of heavy explosive weapons in densely populated civilian areas. We have seen the genocidal intent, harming children, undermines the future existence and self-determination of the Palestinian people. And the scale of harm is unbelievable. We have seen more than 20,000 Palestinian children have been killed, more than 44,000 have been injured, and widespread psychological trauma, displacement, orphanhood, starvation, disability, with no access to education or healthcare. Israeli forces have targeted and bombed hospitals, neonatal units, schools, even tents. Physicians have been targeted, journalists have been targeted, civilians and children have been targeted. These are barbaric war crimes. All water wells have been destroyed in Gaza. The agricultural land has been destroyed, and Israel has prevented food and clean water and medical supplies entering into Gaza. The civilian infrastructure essential for children's survival and development has been destroyed. Babies are being are being killed and starved to death because they're deprived of infant formula. Such barbaric behavior, depriving babies of infant formula. Babies and children are dying from starvation and disease, lack of shelter and clean water. And it's not just Gaza. The report defines what is happening in the West Bank. Beyond Gaza, the Commission documents war crimes in occupied West Bank, including children killings, settler violence, arbitrary detention, torture, rape, and gender-based violence against Palestinian children in detention. In the occupied West Bank, Palestinian children have been subjected to unlawful killings, arbitrary detention, torture, and cruel treatment and violence. And the Commission has concluded that these acts amount to genocide, crimes against humanity and war crimes under its legal analysis and calls for accountability. Canadian doctors are demanding that Canada take action as advised by the UN International Commission report and take meaningful action to stop the genocide of the Palestinian children. We must end these double standards. We are reminded that in World War II, in London, 650,000 children were evacuated. 3,000 pregnant women were evacuated for safety in anticipation of the bombing. But in Gaza, we see that the children are the targets of the bombing, the shooting, the use of illegal white phosphorus on Children's Hospital in Gaza. We are seeing children being targeted and killed, and Canada must take meaningful action now. We cannot allow the barbarity of targeted killing of children to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ali Khan. Now I move on to Rabbi David Mivasair.
Thank you, Fareed. So I am Rabbi David Mivasair, an active member of Independent Jewish Voices Canada, which is a grassroots Jewish organization all across Canada. And I'm here to echo and perhaps add to some of what Fareed and Dr. Khan have already said. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who many people consider to be the foremost Jewish moral voice of the 20th century, escaped the Holocaust, found refuge in America, and taught generations of younger rabbis in America, and was very much the voice of Jewish moral authority. And he taught from his own experience that in a democracy such as Canada, not all are guilty, but all are responsible. All of us Canadians are responsible for what our government does and what our government doesn't do. There's sins of commission and sins of omission. So we're here today to address some of that. It is absolutely shocking to me that we've gone for 1,000 days of blatant, live streamed, completely visible Israeli attacks on Palestinians in Gaza, destroying buildings, as we've heard, destroying hospitals, destroying schools, targeting doctors and journalists and everyone. And our Canadian government continues to support Israel in critically important ways, even though the liberal-led parliament passed an arms embargo on Israel. It left loopholes in the wording that enable Canadian companies to continue to send weapons components to Israeli weapons companies. They just do it through third parties. Everyone knows this. It's been proved, even though it was denied by our government, falsely denied. There's no doubt that this continues to happen. That's one example. Canada continues to provide diplomatic cover for Israel. Canada refuses to support South Africa's case in the International Court of Justice. Canada allows completely known war criminals to enter Canada, to speak publicly. Canada allows tens of millions of dollars in tax deductible, supposedly charitable contributions that are violating CRA regulations to go to Israeli organizations that directly fund military operations, that steal land from Palestinians and force them out of their homes. This is a long list. I'll add a few more things. About a year and a half ago, in January 2024, Canada made a great announcement that it was going to allow people who are relatives, family members of Canadian citizens who live in Gaza and are being targeted being murdered. We were going to allow them to come to Canada. And then there was a numerical limit put on that. And then there were so many requirements put on it. They had to report on forms every mark on their body, every place they had lived, every place of employment. Some of these people are older than the state of Israel. They're late 70s or 80s. They didn't have addresses, right? This is an impossible bureaucratic barrier. So in the last year and a half, with something like 80,000 people or more being killed by the Israelis in Gaza, direct family members, brothers and sisters, even spouses, even children, even parents of Canadian citizens in Gaza, the number allowed into Canada in 2.5 years is about 850. So when I say that Canadian citizens may not be guilty of these things, most of us are not, but we're all responsible because living in a democracy, we choose this government. We empower this government. We enable it to do what it does and what it hasn't done. So we Canadians need to mobilize to push this government to do some of the very basic things that are absolutely necessary. A simple thing was in an op-ed in the Toronto Star today, and that is to end Canada's diplomatic relations with this country that is prosecuting a genocide. That is so simple. Another simple thing is to stop allowing charitable donations that are clearly used for illegal purposes, to stop them. The Canada Revenue Agency has started doing that, but we have a long way to go. Another is to enforce a true arms embargo, a two-way arms embargo, and not just arms, all kinds of military sales, some of which is not hardware. Canada still has what's called the Canada-Israel Free Trade Agreement, which gives preferred trade status to goods and services from the occupied Palestinian territories that Israel conquered close to 70 years ago, and 60 years ago. And Israel rules over them. According to Global Affairs Canada, that's illegal. The settlements are illegal. Canadian formal foreign policy considers those settlements impediments to peace, but at the same time, we grant them most favored trade status. There are many other steps that Canada can take unilaterally, doesn't need any other country's agreement, and we Canadians are responsible for what our country is doing. So thank you, Fareed, for creating this opportunity to speak today, and I'll just turn it back to you.
Thank you, Rabbi David. I'm not sure if your microphone is working, Senator Wu, but I will turn the microphone over to you.
Yes, thank you, Fareed. Can you hear me well enough?
Yes, we can hear you.
Super. I'm pleased to join with you and colleagues to mark this grim anniversary. I'm calling in from Vancouver, British Columbia, remembering 1,000 days of genocide. It is 1,000 days since Israel's relentless and progressively harsh attack on Gaza, but it's 78 years since the occupation of Palestine, known as the Nakba. It has been a repression that has gone on for decades and decades, the last 1,000 days of which has been in some ways the most horrific and the clearest example of the injustice that Israel has been meting out to the people of Palestine. A lot has been said already by other speakers. Let me simply say this as a parliamentarian. I represent in a small way my province and this country, and I am embarrassed that I have not been able to do more to stop the genocide. I know full well from international law that even if I cannot stop tanks from going into Gaza, our country has a responsibility to do everything it can to minimize the harm to Palestinians because the UN has already warned us that there's a plausible genocide. And yet I am struck by the repeated denials and prevarication and the dragging of feet on the part of our government to do something concrete, to do all the things that have been mentioned by Farid and Rabbi David. You know, as Omar El-Akkad has said, one day everyone will always have been against this genocide. One day all of us will be saying, of course it was a genocide. Of course it was intolerable. Of course this was wrong. And I just plead with my fellow parliamentarians, I plead with the leaders of this country, who I think know deep down that something rotten is going on, to stop with the excuses, to stop with the coddling of those who would try to protect Israel at all costs and do what is necessary for Canada to restore its position, its reputation as an upholder of human rights and a protector of international law. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. And now I'd like to turn the microphone over to Dania Kassim, a lawyer with legal. Dania, you can you can tell what organization you're with.
Hello, my name is Dania Kassim. I am a staff lawyer at the Legal Center for Palestine. I'm joining this press conference from Treaty 13, situated on the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat and the Haudenosaunee. 1,000 days into this genocide, we call on the Canadian government to finally meet its legal obligations under the Genocide Convention. We are calling on the Canadian government to salvage its commitment to international law, act to end this genocide, and punish those involved in committing this heinous crime. The Genocide Convention was unanimously adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 1948 to prevent and punish genocide as the most egregious of crimes. The convention was ratified in Canada over 70 years ago in 1952 and subsequently incorporated into parts of domestic law. Currently, Article 1 of the Genocide Convention creates a legal duty for states to prevent and punish genocide. Canada is failing to meet this fundamental obligation. Canada's obligation to prevent genocide has been triggered for almost 3 years. As early as October 14, 2023, United Nations officials have been warning of a grave danger that we may witness a genocide in Gaza. By October 28, 2023, the director of the United Nations High Commissioner of Human Rights sounded the alarm in a public letter labeling the circumstances in Gaza, and I quote, a textbook case of genocide. Since then, Israel's actions have only continued to escalate. Over 80,000 Palestinians have been killed. International law has only become clearer on this genocide. In January 2024, the International Court of Justice delivered an initial ruling on South Africa's lawsuit against Israel alleging genocide in Gaza. The ICJ recognized it was plausible that acts of genocide were being committed and directed Israel to take provisional measures to prevent genocide. The ICJ's order left no room for doubt. It clearly triggered the obligation for states to prevent genocide. In November 2024, the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant for war crimes and crimes against humanity. Most recently, as Dr. Aliya mentioned, the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territories issued a report on Israel's deliberate targeting of children. Article 3 of the Genocide Convention makes complicity in genocide a punishable crime. At this stage, by continuing to enable Israel and refusing to meaningfully act, Canada is at high risk of being complicit. Now, what would it mean for Canada to meet its obligations under the Genocide Convention? To start, stop supplying the weapons that enable this bloodshed through a full arms embargo, suspending economic support through the Canada-Israel Free Trade Agreement, sanctioning Israeli officials orchestrating this genocide, and prosecuting Canadians involved in the genocide and committing war crimes through the Israeli military. These are not extraordinary acts. This is the minimum for Canada to meet its obligations under international law. We are 1,000 days late. Every day counts. We call on the Canadian government to finally meet its minimum obligations to prevent and punish genocide. Thank you.
Thank you, Dania. Do we have any journalists?
The question period of the press conference. There are no journalists in the room. I see Dylan Robertson from the Canadian Press who has a question. Go ahead, Dylan.
Hi there. Thanks for taking our questions. I might start with Dr. Khan. I'm wondering if I can ask you about what's happening lately in Gaza. We know that there was a loose ceasefire. The situation got a lot less attention from that point on last fall. There's still restrictions on aid reaching the territory. Israel has majority control over the territory. What I understand lately is, there's less military activity in terms of, bombs going off. There's more of a persistent suffering, a lack of essentials. Is that a correct way of understanding what's going on the ground, in recent weeks?
Yes, thank you, Dylan. Essentially, the ceasefire has been a smokescreen to allow the genocide to continue. Israel continues to prevent adequate entry of food, water, even baby formula for malnourished babies to receive adequate treatment. And these are babies and children who are dying from starvation. And Israel is preventing adequate medical supplies to enter into Gaza, and the genocide is continuing. Children are still being shot and killed. And we have Palestinian children who are being detained in administrative detention, and the conditions in these detention facilities are horrific. And we desperately need international humanitarian workers on the ground to document and protect the children, to protect the Palestinian children. It is absolutely critical that the international community become involved and not allow the genocide to continue.
Thank you. And
Could I add to that, Dylan?
sure.
So a missing piece that wasn't said out loud is Israel continues to attack. It's not just a matter of denying humanitarian supplies, but virtually every single day there are attacks from drones and from planes. I'm directly in touch with several dozen people in Gaza, and literally every day people are being killed by Israeli attacks. And if you need more information on that, I'd be happy to talk with you after this press conference is over, and I can provide you with very specific, detailed information. And another factor is Israel not only has majority control, Israel actually totally, directly controls 70% of the very small territory that is the Gaza Strip. I'm in the city of Hamilton right now. The entire Gaza Strip is 1/3 the size of the city of Hamilton, Ontario. Israel has militarily occupied and expelled all the people from about 70% of it. That's about 2 million people crushed into an area that's about 30% of something 1/3 the size of Hamilton, Ontario. And again, if you want, I can give you more detailed information and documentation of all this.
I might use my follow-up for something partially related here. I do have more questions if there's time about the situation in Gaza. I just wanted to ask Mr. Khan, what you make of this inclusion council that the Prime Minister launched to replace the Islamophobia and the anti-Semitism envoy. The government suggested that the envoys weren't able to bring Canadians together, that the council might make it more possible for Muslims and Jews to have more of a productive dialogue. I just wanted to get your perspective as someone who follows these issues pretty closely.
Well, frankly, while the intent is positive, effectively this council is a smokescreen. It's led by someone who was the president of the Canada-Israel Committee, an ardent Zionist, and it is Zionism that is the cause of what is happening in Gaza and the West Bank and East Jerusalem. So I don't know what the Prime Minister was intending, but these two envoy positions, as flawed as they might have been, as some people said, they were actually accomplishing something. They were, and certainly the Islamophobia envoy, it was put in place after 9 Muslims were murdered in hate attacks in Canada. So I'm still waiting to see what more is going to come out of this council that the Prime Minister has appointed. But frankly, I don't really have a lot of hope, because in his words and certainly his lack of action, Prime Minister Carney has shown that he doesn't really care about Canadian Muslims, and he certainly doesn't care about Palestinians, whether it's here in Canada or in Gaza or in all of the occupied Palestinian territories.
Did you
I just had a.
Go ahead, Dylan.
Yeah, I might try 2 more questions, and if you cut me off, that's fine. But I just wanted to ask about anyone who wanted to respond to the lack of follow-through that we've seen from the Israeli government and Israeli officials on issues that Canada has expressed concern about. The destruction of the water treatment center that was called the Canada Well, the shots that were fired near the diplomats in the West Bank, the World Central Kitchen worker Jacob Flickinger, the Canadians who were killed in Lebanon, the lack of consular access for the flotilla activists. There's been a series of cases where the government has asked for an investigation or clarity, the partial destruction of the cemetery in Gaza of Commonwealth war graves. What are we to make of the lack of findings that we've seen so far? This is still an active conflict situation, but our government has asked for clarity, and I'm not sure if we've actually seen answers from Israel.
Okay, Dylan, can I begin and then the others can follow? Frankly, I don't think we should expect anything from the Israeli government for the entirety of its existence. The Israeli government shows that it doesn't care about international law. It doesn't care about what other nations think. And it has shown that repeatedly. Israel has violated every ceasefire agreement that it has signed with the various parties it signed them with. Canada can continue to express indignation all it wants, but it needs to do something more concrete than words. Only then will Israel start to listen, and it has to do it in conjunction with other nations. As I mentioned during my remarks, our NATO allies, Belgium, Turkey, and a couple of others, have actually joined the South Africa genocide case. I think if Canada joined, that would send a strong signal, as well as the other asks that I and other speakers have mentioned. If anyone else wants to respond, please go ahead.
If I may, Dylan, you gave a very good list of atrocities and crimes Israel has committed, which Canada has responded to, but with no appropriate follow-up from Israel. You left out one. There's a long list. There's much more to be said, but you left out the sanctioning of Judge Kimberly Pross. This is by the United States, but it's related to the same issue of impunity. And that's how I would put it. You do not ask the perpetrator of a crime to investigate itself. And this is what we've been doing. We've been fooled once, we've been fooled twice. We should not be fooled again. Take direct action to sanction Israel for not following up on the promises that it has made. I moved a motion in the Senate of Canada nearly a year ago now to call on the government to simply examine its risk of complicity, to look at its obligations under international law, what it should be doing. The motion unfortunately failed by 40 votes against 11. And this is why I'm so dismayed that within our leadership class, within Parliament, there's so little willingness to recognize our responsibility, our obligation to international law, never mind to help with the suffering of the Palestinian people.
Anyone else want to add?
I'd like to add that I think Canada's leadership should be guided by the words of David Ben-Gurion, the first Prime Minister of Israel, who famously said, "It matters not what the Goyim say." In other words, it doesn't matter what the nations of the world say. What matters is what the Jews do. And that seems to be Israel's guiding principle. Israel will do what it wants unless and until someone directly intervenes to stop it, which really has happened in the past around the Sinai crisis when Eisenhower was president. George Bush was able to get the Israelis to comply, right? But the Canadian government should not expect that words are going to have any serious impact at all on the Israeli government.
I'd like to add also that I think that it is actually a stain on Canada's reputation that we have not taken any action in the face of genocide. And this is a stain on Canada's reputation. Previously, we were a leader for international humanitarian law and for standing up for human rights and human dignity. And today we have failed. We have failed the Palestinian people. We have failed the Palestinian children. And it is really a shame.
I would have to add a closing remark on that question. Canadian diplomats and Canadian officials were involved in the drafting of the Genocide Convention and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And if they were alive today, they would be ashamed at what they're seeing of how our Canadian government is basically stomping on those two treaties and documents.
Yeah, and then just one last question for Senator Wu. I'm wondering how you would describe what happened with your motion to probe whether Canada has been complicit in war crimes. You know, I saw what happened in the Red Chamber, but I'm just wondering if you could describe what happened, I don't know, on the back channel or you know, why this didn't actually get passed.
Well, you should speak to the senators who voted against the motion. I'm not going to presume to look inside their heads, but you will know that Senator Husakos spoke before the vote and spoke against the motion. His basic thesis was that we should not pass a motion to embarrass Canada. Just let that sink in. He has the idea, and perhaps other senators too. Again, I don't want to presume to know what they think. But he has the idea that there should be no self-examination of our country's actions. This is not the Canada that I am proud of. This is not the Canada I believe in. And the motion didn't even criticize Canada. It was the mildest possible motion. It was simply to call on Canada to examine its risk of complicity, given everything we know about international law. Given everything we know about what we have done in other situations of atrocities. I'll give you one hypothesis for why people are so afraid to even look at the risk of complicity. It is that they are fearful of being labeled anti-Semites. So let me go back to your question on the Unity and Inclusion Council. Their first focus will be to look at the rise in anti-Semitism and what to do about it. That's good. But let me say that the most important question they're going to have to address, that all of Canada is going to have to address, that Mark Carney will have to address, his cabinet will have to address, and all parliamentarians will have to address, is this, that it is not anti-Semitic to criticize Israel for documented violations of international law and atrocities. We need to say this loud and clear, because until we have this understanding, there are people who will be fearful of even making the mildest criticism of a horrible, horrible situation facing Palestinians today.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. This concludes the press conference. Merci.
Thank you all for joining, for getting up early in your part of the country, Senator Wu. And please, we'll talk later on email. Thank you very much. And
Thank you. Thank you, Farid.